Well, that's right. They're obviously keeping a close eye, Tom, on the number of cases in those regional areas in Victoria, and obviously they'll change that decision if there are further outbreaks. Obviously, they're watching very closely what's happening, particularly in the Mitchell Shire in regards to that Chadstone Shopping Centre cluster. But the Northern Territory Chief Minister, Michael Gunner, did announce today that if all continues to progress as it is at the moment, that from November 2, the Northern Territory would remove a hotspot from much of regional Victoria and allow those people into the Northern Territory.
Right now, we will plan to remove the hotspot declaration in 4 weeks' time for all Victorian local government areas outside of metropolitan Melbourne, with the exception of Greater Geelong, Macedon Ranges, the Mitchell Shire and the East Gippsland Shire. We're holding back on these 4 areas for now, given they've had a confirmed case in the past fortnight, just so that our team can investigate them a little further and be totally sure there is no further community transmission from these cases.
So they will continue to monitor the situation in those 4 regional areas, Tom, but otherwise it looks like the Northern Territory's borders will reopen to large parts of regional Victoria from the 2nd of November. Now, it's a very different world up here in the NT to what people are living through in Victoria at the moment. In fact, there was a music festival held on Saturday night where several thousand people attended, and there wasn't much social distancing going on there. So while Territorians are enjoying their freedom, Tom, there have been some concerns raised that perhaps they're enjoying life a little bit too much. That was certainly something that was raised by the Deputy Chief Medical Officer, Charles Payne, at that news conference this morning. Here's a bit of what he had to say.
I have to say we are watching that closely and concerned about it. We're working with partners in the industry, pubs and clubs and so on. The Public Health Advisory Group that the Chief Health Officer chairs discusses those things regularly and the measures that we need to put in place. But if I could just appeal to our Territory community, we must remain vigilant. This is something which is going to be with us for the foreseeable future.
The Northern Territory has implemented this hotspot policy after opening its borders essentially to the entire nation from the 17th of July. Now, those hotspot areas have been excluded. From this Friday, it will lift the hotspot area for the Greater Sydney region. That will potentially allow millions more people to travel to the Northern Territory. We've already seen close to 100,000 people travel to the NT, Tom, since those borders were lifted. Some interesting comments from the Chief Minister too ahead of tomorrow's federal budget. Obviously, the Northern Territory heavily reliant on GST funding. Michael Gunner was asked if he'd support an increase in the rate of the GST. We certainly know that New South Wales has lobbied pretty hard for this in the past. He certainly wasn't ruling that out when he was asked the question.
I've always been open to a taxation conversation, and I think as soon as you are willing to be open, you've got to let other people put ideas. If you start killing things day one, you end up not having the conversation, you stay status quo. So for me, I've always had a concern around the size of the rate, because as we know, it impacts the poorest the hardest, if that makes sense. So you've got to have a think about that. So I've never leant towards that side of things, but you know, if you're willing to have a conversation, you've got to let other people put their points.
We know, Tom, that about 70% of the Northern Territory's total revenue comes from Canberra, and a large part of it comes through that GST. So no surprises there, I don't think, that the Chief Minister, Michael Gunner, says he'd be open to that conversation about lifting the rate of the GST when you consider how heavily the Northern Territory relies on that revenue source.
Yeah, absolutely. Quick question, actually, Matt. Just looking at some of the tourism businesses around, obviously a lot of these businesses rely on advanced booking, so the borders are up now, but are they beginning to struggle?
Look, they've been doing okay, Tom, to be honest. I think one of the things that's helped them is that the government locally has thrown a lot of money at this. They've had a voucher system in place that has essentially given local residents up to $800 to spend at some of these businesses. I was out and about last week. I was on holidays. I was down at Litchfield Park, and there was certainly a lot of people there. Talking to some of the tour operators there, they said they'd been particularly busy on the weekends. Obviously, their concern will be what happens once those vouchers have been used up. So they're pretty keen to see people from other states and territories allowed into the NT. I think opening the Northern Territory's borders to Sydney this Friday could see a significant boost to them as well.
Yeah.